Welcome back to part two of my chat with author and journalist Trent Dalton. In part one, we talked about Trent's upbringing and his hugely successful novel Boys, Swallows Universe, and a lot of other things about the world in which Trent grew up in. Now I'd like to talk about his new book, Lola in the Mirror, and also the topic of love, which we touched on in part one, but we're going to delve deeper into it. So it might sound a bit strange for a podcast called I Catch Killers, talking about love, but Trent, let's give it a go. Welcome back.
It's great to be here, Gary. I really, really enjoy talking to you, mate.
You just a touch on one thing. You're hanging around people that became avid readers, and did I hear you say on one time that you were talking that one of the first books that inspired you or made you interested in reading was Papillon?
Oh, oh, hell yeah! I mean, that book was huge in our house, mate. I mean, that's the story of a guy who's just doing time. The power of that book is so incredible because it's all about, and it could have been the kind of the life of Slim Halliday, who's this guy that we knew us Dalton boys as boys, as kids, and he was a friend of this guy that we loved as a boy, who sort of certainly knew the criminal world. But Papillon's all about this guy just stuck in prison and just sort of trying to keep his brain occupied and not succumbing to the darkness. And
Yeah.
and the power of the book is by the time he actually steps out into the light, it's incredibly huge. So it kind of taps into that stuff we were talking about in part one of this chat. It's that book is all about holding on to the light in the dark, and but also, my old man handed me that book. Like, it's just the funniest thing. Like, our dad, wonderfully so, was never like never adhered to any sort of like age appropriate kind of. It was just like, if you want to read Silence of the Lambs at 12, like, go for it,
Go for it.
and yeah, and it's like, because I think he knew it's kind of like, yeah, I guess you boys have seen some shit, so like, just here, just read this, and it might put some things in your head. And Papillon was one of those really powerful things as a boy to read and go, damn, this is what like Slim was going through, and this is what this guy Lyle was going through, and it's like, it was such a great kind of world for me to step in. Then the weirdest thing that came from that, though, Gary, is that I started so I went through a bunch of prison books. Like, it's like I like stories like The Count of Monte Cristo, where some guy does a stretch and then he's like, he comes back and redeems himself. Absolutely love stories where that told something from, there's one version of the guy's life, and then later, like, time passes and things that happened 40 years ago that were seeded 40 years ago flower 40 years later. I was like, I got really taken with books like that. But then what happened? Then I got into my teens, and it's really weird. Like, I started reading all these books about drugs, like a book by William Burroughs named Junkie. Like,
Yeah.
I was just into this guy William Burroughs, and it was like, and I think I know. And my old man was worried about me. He's like, going, "What? Why are you reading William Burroughs?" And it's just like, I don't know, but I just think I was, obviously. I look back now, I was like, oh, obviously, I was trying to make sense of like why,
What?
why do people get hooked on drugs and stuff? And I was just like, trying to work it out, and I got really caught up in that, and then. So it's amazing, like, so it is almost like everything I do is fueled by some sort of real world thing,
It's
but yeah.
it's amazing the impact, and the reason that resonated with me. I've been at writers' festivals and that, and people go, "When did you get into reading?" And it was Papillon, and
Oh, are you serious,
I'm
Gary? Oh,
serious. I've
wow.
said it on a number of podcasts, and
Oh,
my situation was, as strangely as this sounds, I reckon I was about 12 or 13. People across the road had some young kids and they needed a babysitter. But I'd babysit, but they were academics and they had a room full of books, and the Wigneys they were called, and
oh, love the Wigneys. That's amazing.
the father said, "Here, why don't you read this?" And that was the first book I sort of really. It's the first. I read other books prior to that, but that's the first book that really got me hooked, and I just a deep dive into that, and that sort of opened up my interest to reading. So I was fascinated when you threw that up as your book.
Well, it's a powerful example, like that Henry Charriere. He's like, he's just talking from experience, and it's sort of like it's just written in his great voice, and it's like it just was a great inspiration for me. As in, like, you don't have to be Cormac McCarthy, and you don't have to be Tim Winton. It's
Yeah.
it's your voice is valid because no one has heard it. Like everyone's voice is valid because no one has heard it. And I was talking to these kids out at Darra, which is this sort of, I lived there for 6 years, real working class suburb in Brisbane. It's just like massive multicultural community. I'm just going, you don't even know it, but Australia is like desperate to hear your voices, like Vietnamese voices, Sudanese voices. Like kids are just up against it, just doing it tough, and just like you're the voices that we need to hear, and it's absolutely valid. However you want to use that voice, you don't have to be Shakespeare. You can be just like Henry and Papillon, and just go, "This happened, and then this happened." He embellishes it a little
Yeah.
bit, but that's cool. That's his story.
Yeah.
That's just I'm so in when I read that book, and I could just picture you, Gary, just sitting there like trying to look after like what. So you were like you're looking after the kids,
I
but
meant to be looking
engrossed.
after the kids, but I was reading the book. I wonder what happened to those kids. But anyway, it's a story in itself. But yeah, that was my introduction into it. Now we're going to hit you up, and I've in all the podcasts I've done, and there would be hundreds by now. I've never in my notes had the topic love. That is the topic we're
That's
about.
amazing. I'm so proud that I brought the love. I'm
You
so
brought
yeah.
you have brought the love to I Catch Killers. Your book, Love Stories. I really like the story and how that evolved and what you did. So tell us about
Oh,
that. I think that's it was quirky, but it was really powerful.
oh, thanks, mate. Yeah, well, all through my journalism career, like there's honestly there's been this woman. Her name's Kath Kelly, and she's the mum of my best mate Greg Kelly, and she'd just type me these beautiful letters, Gary, just random things I'd get literally sent to the Courier Mail and then later the Australian, and just be on beautiful typed letter on this 1960s Olivetti typewriter that she had, this sky blue 1960s Olivetti typewriter. Now that typewriter was her best friend. Like she probably spent more time with that typewriter than a lot of people, in close people in her life, and she'd type letters to like churches and school principals and just fighting for the human rights and all, just really feisty Irish Catholic woman, and she just write me the most touching letters. Like after I'd write a magazine feature, and she'd go, "Oh, you got me on that one, Trent. Keep going." She'd always write these things like, "You've got good stuff in you. Like keep going," and they were very inspiring. And she really loved words and she was one of the big reasons, that I wrote Boy Swallows Universe. To be honest, it's like you got something bigger. Like give me something bigger, and she died, mate, on Christmas Day 2020. It was sort of right in the heart of COVID.
Yeah.
She got rushed to hospital, and we went to her funeral, and it was one of those beautiful funerals where you saw that phenomenon where you these days at funerals where you get to see a life lived, and if anyone of any decent age, she'd lived to 89, I think it was, and so there was photographs of Kath, grainy black and white, and all the way to like 1960s, 1970s with a bit of color, and then all the way to iPhone 2010s, and you're just so moving to watch her life, and then I looked around, and honestly, there were people standing up at the back, and I just went, Kath, like, bravo, you did it. You lived a life of such grace and kind of love for everyone but yourself. That at your funeral there was just no place to get a seat if you came late, and it's like that's the meaning of life. Like, live a life so full that latecomers will not find a seat at your funeral. And we're out the back. So hot day, it was like January 6th, hot Queensland day, like high summer, and we're standing in the car park of this funeral home, right? And we're at Greg, my mate's car, his Subaru, and as per Kath's request in the hospital, like in bed, she turns to Kel, that's Greg, and says, "You got to do some things for me. You got to drink all the cans of 4X Gold. There was about 30 cans of 4X Gold in a fridge before the ambulance took her to hospital. You got to all drink those at my funeral." It's like, okay, tick. And then Kel goes, so we're toasting it, having a drink, and he goes, Trent, there was another request, and he opens the back of his Subaru and leans in and pulls out this 1960s sky blue Olivetti typewriter and says, Mum wanted you to have it. And mate, it gets me emotional to, even talk about it, because it was the most beautiful gift I've ever received. Easy by far. And because it was so future. It was so sort of future thoughtful. Like she was as though she just sort of was like, I don't, who's going to do something with this?
Yeah.
I know Trent will. Like, and it's like it was such a beautiful gesture. And
Getting a gift like that, you'd almost feel a sense of responsibility. What have I got to do with this?
Gary, that's exactly right. It was just like, well, I better bloody well use it. Yeah. So 2 months later, we came out of a COVID kind of lockdown. We didn't have it too bad in Brisbane, but some of them we'd sort of come out, and I was just really feeling like going out. And I probably talked about my books a bit too much, where it's like a lot of those books are very much inspired by my real life, and I just wanted to get out of my own head for a bit. And I called up Kel, and I just go, mate, would you mind if I just got this crazy idea I woke up with, and I called Cal and I'm like, mate, would you mind if I took your mum's typewriter out to the busiest corner of Brisbane, corner of Adelaide and Albert Street? I'm going to have a desk. I'm going to have a sign saying "Sentimental Writer collecting love stories. Do you have one to share?" Yeah, and I'll type them up on Kath's typewriter while I'm sitting there for 8 hours each day. And he's like, Trent, Mum would love nothing more. I think she would, because that was the type of journalism she loved me do most. Like, she loved the stuff when I'd just randomly knock on a house door and do some story on someone. And so, mate, I did it for like 2 months across like March and April of that year. And unbelievably, about 200 people stopped, and just some people stopped and said I was the biggest dickhead on earth for doing such an exercise. But most people just stopped and just said, "Oh, can I tell you about my aunt who saved my life when no one loved me? Or can I tell you about so many like 75-year-old woman stops and goes, can I tell you about my husband who's been dead for 5 years because my kids don't like me talking about him anymore."
So these are random strangers sitting down and talking to you about deeply personal, emotional things in that environment.
Everyone's going back and forth to their jobs, going on their lunch breaks, and there we are. It would take approximately 10 minutes before both of us sometimes would start crying, because it just cuts out everything, Gary. Like you if you go straight to talking about someone you either miss, someone who you cherish, you just cut through so much bullshit. Like you were just already 1,000 miles past real estate conversation. You were so far past tax. You're just getting to the nitty gritty of what we're here for. And we would just cut to the chase. It was a reason for people to sit. There were 2 chairs. I was on one of them, and there was a vacant chair. And so many people, I think, just stopped because they were just going, oh, that would be so embarrassing to sit there like that. And look, he's just sitting there all alone. And I think they just sat sometimes just because they were kind, And then I'd go, oh, do you want to tell me something? People are amazing. And then they'd go, invariably, like a lot of blokes, oh, no, mate, I got no love stories. And I'm like, all right. Well, tell me about someone you really care about. Oh, well, there was Lisa back in 1975, and she handed me a cherry ripe, and then we kissed in a theater, and it just, and then Lisa became my wife, and then we had 4 kids. It was so, you're like, suddenly this guy's just gently telling the most amazing love story, or someone sits and says, I have a rotating series of photographs of my late husband on my fridge, and every night I cry over them as I'm making the pasta, and because he passed away under a falling awning, and his last act on this earth was to push 2 kids out of the way before that awning fell on him, and I can never love anyone else because even though he's passed away, I can still smell him in his jumpers. I can still see him when I dance, and it's just like, it's just a beautiful human being just telling the most amazing, sort of extraordinary but totally ordinary love story, and it's just like, it was the most amazing exercise in kind of listening, and exactly what you do, Gary, with this podcast. It was just that, except our topic, it was just, the topic was love, and love of any form, and the thing I wanted it to be is not cheesy, so inherently, the book's called Love Stories, but it's actually so dark, that book. Like, it's like, love can be so hard, and love can be so tough.
Unreturned love, all sorts of love, isn't it?
Unreturned love, mate, was this one of the most touching. I remember this guy, Bob Stafford, just rough as guts fisherman. And he just goes, mate, I fucked up. I screwed up when I was 35, and I wish I could go back and just change everything, and it's just so romantic. This 75-year-old fisherman just going, oh, I know what I did, and I just wish I could go back and tell my 35-year-old self not to ruin that relationship. And I was like, Yeah, it's just like, yeah.
What,
So it was a great process.
how did you find? Was it draining for you, or was it invigorating for you? Because I know when you're talking deeply about people's emotions, sometimes it can take the energy away from you. Other times you can
Mm.
walk out and you're on cloud nine. How did you find the experience?
It's a danger. It's a funny thing. Like my wife and I talk about it all the time, and it's a real problem where and I've tried to get better at it. And it's a story of my kind of journalistic life as well, where I'm standing in the kitchen, and it's the most important time, right? It should be the most important time of my day, which is about 6 to 8 in the kitchen with my wife, right? That is a very important time of the
Yeah,
day. And I'm thinking about the bloody story that someone told me at 11 a.m. that day when I should be just right in there with my wife, and she knows it when I'm drifting off thinking about some story. And what I mean by that is those people on that street got the best version of me, and I'm really attentive. Like I'm very energetic when I'm listening. I'm very puppy dog like, where I'm just like, keep going, like I'm doing head nods. I'm like, right, and then it does take a lot out of you, that type of listening. And by the time I'm getting home, I'm quite exhausted and stuff. And but then here's the thing, Gary. I realized by the time I finished even writing the book, it was like, shit. Of course, like I was writing it because, in truth, like I need to get back to just sort of really looking at some shit in my
yeah,
marriage, and like just really making sure, just really just balancing things up a bit more. And I'd hear things out on that street. I remember one guy just going to me, "Have you ever asked your, like, I know this sounds like a dorky thing to say, but this guy said, have you ever asked your wife this question?" And he said, "I ask my wife this question once every month." And he goes, every month I sit down, I go, "Honey, is there any way I can be a better husband for you?" And I was like, holy
yeah.
shit. In
It's
23 years I've been with my wife, I've never asked something so selfless. And I was
yeah,
like, I just learned so much. And I realized, like, talking honestly to this point now,
yeah.
like, I realized that was just a big subconscious, unconscious exercise of me trying to sort of sort things in the one love story that, like, is the most important love story. And so the whole great realization in that book, and it's the best part of the book, is when, like, idiot me realizes, I asked 200 strangers to tell me a love story, but I forgot to ask my wife. And so,
Yeah.
like, she comes swan diving into the sort of back end of the book with just this kind of, I got her to type a letter on Kath's typewriter about what she thinks love is, and it's the most devastating kind of powerful thing, and it kind of showed me while I was doing the whole bloody thing. So it's sort of, yeah, all of those
It's
answers just
it's
reveal themselves. Yeah.
it's an interesting way to check yourself on what your life is become or what you're doing. And when you said that and you talk enthusiasm, if I use the word passion, we're talking about the same thing. I would throw
Yeah.
myself in 100% into my work, and that. And a couple of times, and people have said to me, close to me, that yeah, you're very giving to the victims. You're out there. You put yourself out there. You've always got time, but you haven't got time for the people closest to you. And
Yeah.
and it hurt because there was some truth to it. And I would just, that's where I found it easier to be in that world than deal with issues in my own world, and it was a way of escaping. And it sounds
Have
like you discovered the same thing with your little project.
was was that, Gary, part of the reason of kind of walking away from police? Sort of. I mean, I know you're
Yeah,
obviously very much enmeshed in police life,
yeah.
but from that hardcore stuff, you was that
Uh,
like how did you sort of did you and were
yeah,
you able to square
I,
the balance, like
I
square the ledger?
I have said this to people when I've left the police, and it wasn't by choosing; it was circumstances. And when I left the police, and then I've sort of had time to take stock of my life, and I was in homicide for most of the time, so it wasn't a 9 to 5 job. But I had to apologise to people closest to me because they allowed me to get myself involved in the investigations and would give me the time. That's why I achieved what I achieved in policing. But they were making sacrifices, and then I'd come back and I'd be beaten up and busted from an investigation, and they'd be there and let me sort of find my way again. My kids said something to me, and that was, and you talk about getting emotional. I'll choose my
Yeah.
words carefully. I'm in control of this, and I'll
Oh man, I'm getting emotional.
hit
You mentioned kids, bro. Yep. Sorry.
hit the stop button if I need to. But when I left the police, controversial circumstances, there's a lot of pressure on me about all sorts of things, and my kids got dragged into it because it was so public. And one of got a son and a daughter. One of them made a comment on social media about we know our dad wasn't there for us all the time, but we know what he was doing was more important, and other people needed him more than we needed him at the time. And
Oh man.
and yeah. I'm glad I've got that out because I can't repeat it. I'm glad you heard it. But that type of thing, and I think that's one of the nicest things my kids could have ever said to me, and it just made me realise that, yeah, they're good people and they understand what I was doing. But it is about checking yourself, isn't it?
Oh, but Gary, I hope those kids, and I'm so kind of, I don't even know them, but I'm proud of them for having the maturity to think like that, and they will fully realize that when they're like 35. But it's sort of what you were doing was so important. It's like I'm sorry. What Gary is doing at that time is extremely important because you're healing families, mate. Like you're just like that. It's just there are certain jobs. I'm sorry that are just so much more important, but I really feel for those people who have those jobs, and can I tell you a really very life changing moment that I had? And it's like, isn't life bloody funny? Like, so I was like, that book, Boy Swallows Universe, was kind of unexpectedly really doing okay, right? And I'd turned 40. It was the week I was turning 40. I went down to Sydney. I flew down to Sydney. It was all in 1 week. Flew down to Sydney. Oh yeah, there's a thing called the ARBIA Awards, which are like the sort of the book industry awards for Australia, and I went down there, and that book, Boy Swallows Universe, won 4 awards, and it was like really, and I was just like flying, mate. It was like I was on top of the friggin' world, Gary, and I was so proud of because it was sort of so real and raw, that story, and it was from the heart. And I come back, it was the night before my 40th birthday. And I was about to have this big party. Everyone was going to dress up as it was a music party. So I was going to dress up as Eddie Vedder, and someone was going to come as Axl Rose, and it's going to be the best bloody time. And my youngest daughter, it was about 10 maybe at the time, just sort of, she's a beauty, she's an angel, but she was just acting up a bit. And I pulled her aside, and I'm like, hey, honey, what's going on? Well, what the hell? Like, what's all this about? And then, mate, she says, and like, she laughs at this now, but it friggin' cut, man. She goes, I don't know, Dad. I just feel we're not as close as we used to be. And I was just like, fuck, man. It's like failed, failed. Just like, you think you're up, you're just lying up like over here.
Everything's ticking, tick, tick, tick. And then closest to you, and you've let your child down.
Exactly, like the one, like genuinely the thing I'm here for. Like my big thing. I'm always searching for. I'm a big sort of searcher, I guess. I search for meaning and stuff, and it's like, man, the meaning of my life is just over there in the living room. Like it's literally just there, and it's like it's not hard. It's not hard to find. And I'd screwed it, and I was just like, it was deep to me, man. And she laughs about that now. She's like, oh, Dad, don't beat yourself up. I think I was trying to make you feel bad. But it's like, she's so sweet about that now. She's 14 now and so friggin' wise. But of course there's truth in that. Like, she knew that I was putting too much into one thing, like, and I'm guilty of it, mate.
But isn't that the beauty of life, that you can check yourself and recalibrate and get it back on track? And we talk redemption, or we mention redemption and things like that. It's never too late. You can't dwell on the past, and you've got to go, okay, well, I can do something a little bit better.
Okay, well, now you're giving me chills, Gary. It's never too late, because I've got some, there's just a couple of honestly, mate, I'm done with sort of, I generally don't need any more boxes ticked. Like I really mean that. Like, I'm honest, but my boxes now are kind of like, they're kind of heart-shaped ones, as cheesy as that sounds, but it's all to do with relationships, and it's all to do with like really being a better friend, being a better brother, like being there for my bros, and trying to, it's so just really deep, important shit. And it's the sort of stuff that Kath Kelly knew about, that getting, that inspired love stories. The reason she was so inspiring to people is that she was one of those women who, like, she will give you that even if you don't send the Christmas card back one year, she'll keep sending you the Christmas card. It'll land in your box December 24. You can count on it, you
Yeah.
know. And it's like that's an extraordinary, selfless life. It's like I just want to start being that person a bit, you know. And
It is something worthwhile aiming for, and just how you've
yeah,
described it, and my mind's like ticking over, going, "Yeah, I think you're on to something there. It's what we should all aim for, because
yeah, yeah.
it's what gives you the joy. It's what brings purpose to life, doesn't it? If you can get
Oh,
your relationships and invest in those.
what, Gary? What did you take from all those years of the hard work? Like, I'm very interested because I just remember that time, you know, when you were really in the thick of it,
Yeah.
and like, what kept you sustained in that time?
Look, it kept me. I felt that I was doing good, something good. It was something worthwhile. So I owned
Yeah.
that, and that sort of drove me. And I would get close to the victims' families in homicide, which I think is quite appropriate and needed, so you can drive yourself. But I know there were times, and I spoke to a police officer recently, Craig Semple, who was going through some hard times in policing. And I could really relate to it. Like he busted his ass on this job of taking down some bikies and really destroyed his home life, or took his eye off the home life, destroyed his health, everything to achieve this result. And it was a great arrest, locked everyone up, blah blah blah, success. And then he was travelling to the office, and a snippet came over the radio about the arrest, and it was a 30-second clip. And he's thinking, "I've destroyed my life," and
Oh,
that was it. And I know there's been times when I've been on high pressure jobs and everything. You know how we talk about ticking the boxes. I'm virtually high fiving myself, going, "Yes, got it, everything I've been looking for." And then you get it home, and you're sitting there on your own, and you're going, all right. Well, I've destroyed this. I've destroyed that, and yeah. So sometimes I reflect on, was it worth it? I think you've got to be true to yourself. It was in my nature to do things that way, but I also try to improve each day, which I think you can relate to. You want to be a better person when you wake up tomorrow than you were today,
oh man.
if possible.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, right, it's the mountaineer. The mountaineer kisses his wife and kids down in the hut, right? Says farewell, climbs the mountain, gets to the top, and realizes the thing he wanted to see the most is back down in the hut, you know. And it's just like, oh damn, you know.
Yeah.
But you get to walk back down, you know. You get to walk back down, and hopefully they're still going to be there.
Yeah. This second book, or not second book, how many books have you written now? What are we
There's
looking at?
five. There's number five,
Five.
mate. Yeah,
Okay.
there's a little one on the first fleet in there that
Yeah.
like no one, you know, like it's just yeah. But I'm real a little thing called By Seeing Stars that I'm really proud of. Yeah, it's a really cool little book. But and then all our Shimmering Skies, and then
Yeah.
Love Stories, and then and then my latest Lola in the Mirror. Yeah.
Lola in the Mirror. You're delving into the dark stuff again: homelessness, domestic violence, drug dealing.
Yeah.
It's a dark world. Is it so closely related to your life as Boy Swallows universe, or is it more things that you've observed?
No, definitely. Well, both.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why, but definitely to start with the personal. I think Gary, I have to write from. I kind of write from that space, that kind of this space of sorrow and mixed with anger and of shit that perhaps my mum went through, and the whole book opens with this line. My mother danced the Tyrannosaurus Waltz,
That blew
and
that blew me away the way you described
oh,
that. So
uh,
describe it to people, because
uh,
I've seen it. I
Of course you
understand where
have.
it's
Of
coming
course you
from.
have. I reckon every cop in Australia's seen it,
Yeah.
mate, and I'm sorry that they have, you know. And hey, by the way, freaking hats off. Um, if I can say quickly, you know, there were times, absolutely. My brothers talk about dinosaurs, and I mean monsters. You know, my brothers and I, we got bigger. There was a particular monster in our life, and my brothers and I got real. You know, we got. You know, the good thing about time is that a kid gets to grow up and learns how to tackle or learns how to, I don't know, just defend themselves. And we fought our monster once, and the monster that was in my mum's life, and you know, she met this guy after kind of did her time, gets out, meets a complete monster, and as you know, that's a story that a lot of ex female prisoners know about too. Just sort of falling into the arms of the first bloke who sort of
Yeah.
might sort of give him a bit of stability. Turned out this monster was like pretty friggin' bad, and I just remember we had this big fight with this monster. And good thing about four boys in a family, that's one brother each limb. And my brother Joel holding down one arm, Ben holding down this guy on another arm, and me holding down the leg, and Jesse holding another leg, as just waiting for
Yeah.
the cops to come. And I just it's just something about like I don't know how many times a police officer must have to face sort of little domestic incidents, and I just cannot. I just know. I know the tension that's in those moments. I
Yeah.
know the drama, and I just salute them so much for just constantly going out there and doing that friggin' stuff. Like, and I know it's a massive part of the job. Sadly, like it's like
It's a
I don't know.
huge part, and I think like with policing, where it's so confronting because it's generally the general duties police, the ones that are on the night shift, afternoon shift, which are usually the youngest police too, not not the most experienced. And I
Of
think
course.
we've all got stories like you're a 20-year-old kid and you're walking in and there's a 40-year-old man that you're trying to
Oh,
explain how they should run their life, or it's
oh,
confronting. But the damages that come from domestic violence, and I think all police forces and the lawmakers are starting to understand the damage that is done with it. And we're talking, the domestic murders and different things. But
yeah.
yeah, your opening description
And
of
so the opening line
yeah,
is, my mother danced the Tyrannosaurus Waltz, and what I'm trying to say there is that thing that we've all seen where a mum's got a baby in her hand, the monster's in front of her, usually a man who's professed to love her. You're inside a fairly contained kitchen, often kitchens, and she tries to go one way, and she steps left, he steps right, she steps right, he steps left, and it's the Tyrannosaurus Waltz. It's the dance. It's the monster dance, and I've seen that. I've seen that a few times, and I just gives me a chill down my spine, sort of thinking about it and how macabre it is, and that whole notion. So the first sort of in the case of Lola in the Mirror, it ends quite extreme, and I won't say what happens,
mm,
but it's just I wanted to refer to that Australian dance that a lot of mums know, and a lot of and doesn't not a lot of women know, that dance that they have to do with certain men, and it's it's kind of worse than ever, that issue. And so I just and that, like, it's like every social issue we have in Australia is all linked, and it's like, so that leads to this increased rate of women on the street, so it's
yeah,
like it's so hard to solve these things, but it's like they're all entwined, and it's sort of I've seen that, like, there were times when I know for certain, Gary, that it could have been my mum on the street because there's just no other option. The option is go on the street or go back to the monster, and that's some terrible options sometimes. And I wanted to write about that stuff and the 120,000 people sleeping rough. But of course, you don't want to be sort of preaching, and you want to make sure you're still telling a yarn. It's
yeah,
our job. It's our job as writers to reflect. I do believe it's our job as writers to reflect the world that we're living in. And in my case, Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. In the lead up to an Olympic Games, but yet we've got 40,000 Queensland women either homeless or at risk, like seriously on the knife edge of
yeah,
homelessness currently, like tonight. And I went to our local homeless shelter recently, this iconic place called Third Space. It's been around for 50 years looking after women, and it's just day beds, mate, filled with women and their kids freaking sleeping in day beds because they don't sleep at nighttime because they're shit scared, and
yeah.
it's like, what is going on? And they're doing like mathletics inside this homeless shelter, and it's just like, how could I not write about that stuff? But of course, if you're going to write about it, you learn from the masters like Dickens and Steinbeck and Shakespeare, and you throw a bit of bloody crime in there, and a bit of mystery, and a bit of love, a bit of a love story as well. And so the idea with Lola in the Mirror, I wanted people to read about some of these issues, but still have a pretty decent bloody yarn in there to read.
I understand what you're saying there, Trent, because I think if it becomes too factual and not
Mm,
holds people's attention, you're a storyteller. How do you get the
yeah,
story across? How do you get it out to people so they listen, they embrace it, and they understand it? They don't
so true.
need the factual detail. They need the emotion that comes from the situation. And
you can speak to higher truths. That's exactly right. There's actually a real writing philosophy in that, telling higher truths within fiction, and it's a very powerful thing. It's like this is what Dickens understood. He saw the social issues out in industrial era London, but he's not harping on about it in some factual way over 400 pages. Yeah, he's going to throw in all these wonderful mentor characters and all these dodgy characters and all these villains, like these horrendous villains, and that are a little bit amped up. Well, of course, they're not real sort of people, but they're kind of versions of people that he saw. And mate, that's all I'm doing.
And creates it so it's embedded in our psyche.
Totally, totally, yeah.
Trent, I could talk with you all day. We
Oh my!
we
Look at us! Oh my God, that's amazing, Gary. Yeah, yeah.
it's just flown the time, but yeah, just keep up the good work and and telling. And I think what you're doing there, I'd like to think maybe I'm stretching it a little bit far here, but I'd like to think that's what we're doing here on Eye Catch Killers. Like, crime is not one-dimensional. The world, there's areas of grey, and there's different things.
Well,
I think the way you're telling your story is not dissimilar to the type of message we're trying to get out here.
Gary, it's beautiful, man, and I love that you can talk to Headley and then you can talk to Grace Tame in the same breath, and it's all connected, mate. It's and talk to me, you know what I mean? I like my kind of story is just a little corner of some bigger stuff, and it's mate, it's just such an honor to talk to you, Gary, and it's been one of the best chats I've done in the past bloody 5 years of me writing books. So thanks for your time, mate.
Well, thank you very much, and all the best for the future. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Gary.
Cheers.